Good, let's get this started. Excellent. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. My name is Stefanie Halbwachs, and on behalf of BikuMTI, I'm happy to welcome you to our webinar about sales pitching. The next half of an hour will give you an insight into the 5 main principles of sales pitching. These rules have the power to change the way you think about your sales pitch forever. If any questions occur throughout the next half an hour, please feel free to write them into our chat. We will answer them at the very end, however you wish to, in German or English. Also, there's one important information. We will be recording this webinar, so if you wish to not be shown, please just turn off your camera. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speaker, Martin van Dam. He's looking back on 25 years of sales experience in a multinational context. He's one of our most valued trainers, and we are very happy to have him here today. Martin, the stage is yours now.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Stephanie. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys together. Half an hour is not very much, so I propose we just dive into it really quickly. All we can do is we can scratch the topics. But what I promise is that this will be the extract of pitching. From my point of view, of course, especially those who haven't or who are in sales will have a benefit of that. The one or other point that I will mention, I am absolutely convinced that you have heard it before. But I can tell by my own experience how good it is to hear these things again, repetitively, and also to reconsider them in new realities as reality changes more than ever. Good. Let me share my screen. Stephanie, you will have to give me the power to share my screen, please.
Of course.
So first of all, in the meantime, I want to give you an overview of what we are planning to do. First of all, I want to give a background on digitalization and trends. This is nothing new to you, and also I'm not an expert in these things, but it is a basis of why we should update our pitch from time to time. Then I'll give you the five rules iteratively. I will not give you them all at once because there's a logic in it. And we'll look at points of action at the end. So, good. Good. So, a bit about the background. We have a few continued trends in digitalization. Nothing new about that, but it's good to look into it again. Of course, artificial intelligence, meaning bots and algorithms, they surround us much more than we are aware of. And of course, they have changed the way we purchase things. They have changed the way we decide things, and also the way we collect our own information and opinion. That is important because if we want to convince somebody, the way people gather information on how to take decisions has changed. And we have to iterate that continuously, even beyond this webinar. We have to go back into our sales pitch and rethink it and reconsider, is it still state of the art? Can it still reach people in a world where people collect their information so much differently? There's been an explosion. The explosion of information goes on. It's exponentially, meaning the content of information doubles in several in years' time, and that means that with that exploding information, people are overwhelmed. People are tired of that, and we compete with more content out there when we talk. Everything gets more complex, of course, with digitalization. Things are more linked to each other, gets more complex. Nothing new about that as well. And news and fake news, of course, maybe it's not a new phenomenon, but the sheer quantity is just mind-boggling. And how difficult it is actually to cross-check and check the sources, and it appears we don't even have the time to check that. Same thing for our client, of course, and our prospect, that they're in the same situation. So what is the consequence of that? In my opinion, there's a word called tech fatigue. That's a word coined by Microsoft, and it's something that I can for sure see in my life. We get tired of being chased by updates of new apps and so on, and new things. More and more, we have the feeling technology drives us rather than we drive it. Simplicity wins. That is something that has always been the case, but it appears that is an ever increasing phenomenon, and we will have more and more of that. So we have to keep that in the back of our head when we build our pitch, that simplicity gets more and more important. Emotionalization, we have that with fake news and news, and we have polarization in that as well. And complexification gives us an incredible urge, demand, or longing for simplicity, and we start taking decisions with intuition more and more. We will get to this in a moment. All in all, they say trust is the new currency. So whoever has the trust of his target group or her target group is the winner. The question, I don't agree that it's the new currency, because it is a very old currency and it has always been the currency. Now it gets a currency that is harder because it's harder to fake it. It's easy to lose trust and it's harder to build it up, and that gives it value. And that's exciting. And that's the good news for humans, because we have the ability, unless we're not trustworthy, we have the ability to gain trust, and with that, to be in contrast of obscure algorithms. If we look at other trends, we have one of the biggest picture is this thing called Alexa. She listens to us the whole day, and her big brother, Google Amazon sends us their advertisement. So she listens carefully and pitches. Some of us are a little bit tired of that, slowly but surely. But then also, we are also quite tired of these call center zombies, I call them. And that's why I have this nasty picture in here. Undead people that they don't sound real, they just read a protocol, and that is something, again, that we can contrast in a good pitch. So let's dive into it, because that brings us to the first important rule that I've ranked right up to the first one. These rules, by the way, they are not they're not in an order. They don't have to be in order, because they're so interlinked with each other that it doesn't matter. I could shift the order all the time. Rule 1, qualify yourself. Nothing new about that. In a pitch, a good pitch always had the qualification, saying that based on my 20 years of experience, I support people doing this and that. The reason why I ranked it up and why I want to point it out so strongly today is because we qualify ourselves in 2 dimensions. The first one is as humans, because that's a resource, in my opinion, that will become of more and more value as based on the background that I mentioned in the beginning. So that is one of the greatest resources you have. If we had more time, I would make a little poll. I would ask you to brainstorm your thoughts, what makes a human, and we would build a little time cloud. We don't have the time for that. I built a word cloud. I built it for you, anticipating what words you would have added. Maybe you would have added other words on top of that. But basically, probably being emphatic is one of the most important ones. Being real, authentic, social, mindful, caring, humorous, emotional. Those are things that make humans, and those are things also that make that give us access to humans. And that is, I think, as long as you are human in this webinar, that will stay and grow as the biggest resource that you've got. So let's focus on that. Humans, real humans, have the possibility, the ability to put themselves in the shoes of others, to have genuine interest in each other, and really to listen and to solve the issues of the others. So point one, as you qualify as a human, you qualify by listening. Quite interesting, by active listening. Keep that in mind, because you might come across this concept of listening again in another context later on. Here's the other aspect, qualify as competent. That's the point that was there always. How do we qualify as competent? There are different dimensions of competence: experience, of course, education, seniority, qualification, a team behind you, an expert behind you, or references. Tesla buys buys my trainings, and so on. At the same time, so dimensions on one hand. On the other hand, you have the way how you transport your competence. One of them is explicitly. I just say I am an expert in the field of environmental engineering.
Okay.
Or implicitly, meaning, yeah. Did you want to say something, Steph?
No, that wasn't me.
Okay, sorry. Implicitly, meaning that you just tied in as you go along, saying that is, for instance, name dropping, saying Microsoft has bought this product lately, or I have been consulting Joe Biden for the last 2 years, or imply, or even in a very modest way, to say I've had the privilege of teaching constitutional law in Yale for 15 years. That makes me very, very competent. And you can do that quite implicitly and very subtly. Yeah, it doesn't have to be very bragging, but it's as sharp as it could be. I noticed one of the cases when they had a big case in the US, a political case around Donald Trump, and there was somebody, a lawyer, who was running this investigation, and he opened his appeal with a qualification that he did very well, saying that I will keep it short because I have learned in my 20 years of teaching constitutional law at Yale that students will fall asleep. What a nice way of qualifying himself and saying implicitly that he is absolutely probably the biggest expert in that room, in a very humorous, funny way, and nobody noticed that he actually did that. But even more effective than showing your competence in an implicit way is to ask competent questions. That really, competent questions, only competent people can ask competent questions. The good thing is we can make these questions up at home. We can make them up in advance. We can prepare them. And then we can move in, as long as we know what we anticipate, of course. But if we have a set of questions just to show that we are of the field, that we have been around for a while. So competent questions is how we qualify our competence. Oh, so we're at listening again. Okay, so next point of listening. Keep that in mind. It might come across again. Rule number 2. No prescription without diagnosis. That, of course, has been coined also by Blair Enns. In 2007, he writes a fantastic book. It's called Win Without Pitching, a manifesto. Also, the way he writes it is very funny, saying, we will not do this anymore. And I can recommend that book, but I must say it's really targeted to people in the creative business who have extremely much freedom in producing their packet, in tying their packet, and so it might not fit everyone. But the term investigative negotiation came to my mind. That is Baserman and Malhotra from in their book in 2008. In the negotiation context, but investigative, I like that word. They are researching their customer. Just imagine a woman, Molly, she walks in to the doctor and she hasn't said anything yet besides good morning. And the doctor says good morning and prescribes her 8 days of antibiotics and sends her out. She would probably be quite stunned, surprised, insecure. Maybe she would be annoyed or irritated, or she might lose trust in this doctor. What kind of doctor is that? Does he subscribe that to everyone? Does he subscribe? Does he have anything else to subscribe? Prescribe. So no prescription without diagnosis. If you wanna keep the impression of being competent, then dig into it. Diagnose. You will say, how can I do that? It scares me. How does a doctor do it? He asks questions. He says, how's your digestion? How is your temperature? How have you been feeling? Do you have an itch or rash? So doctors have a set of diagnostic questions. And in this case, you are the doctor. The expert is the doctor. You know which questions to ask. Sit down and prepare questions. One of the most important yields out of those questions might be, is this a patient at all? Is this a person? Is this a potential customer at all? Or are we both wasting our time, or is it just a nice get together? So we're investigating to get to the underlying problem. According to Blair Enns, he says, the deeper you go, the more potential to sell a more meaningful product, and it multiplies the profitability of that product. So your price goes up, not because you want to earn so much, but primarily because you have helped somebody fix the real problem rather than the apparent problem. So diagnostic questions, it brings us back to listening. So this is the third time we've ended up in listening. Let's see if we come across that again. This is also where the start of the value creation process starts. It's only the initiating, because we haven't sold anything yet. We haven't even assembled a product yet. All we have done is we have cross-checked in an answering, questioning dialogue where our opposite is at, and what we could contribute. That brings us directly to the next point. Stop selling products. What else should I sell? Sell solutions. Yeah, this is also something that Blair Enns mentioned. You can tell that I'm quite under impression of this guy presently. It's a different thing. It's distinct from our last point of saying that we want to diagnose before we look at the prescription. Here, this is a focal question. So rather than selling a product, we want to go into the solution of what we want to supply, and we're now in the middle of the value creation process. Blair Enns takes it so far as saying selling a product instead of a solution is unethical. He answers this to a question where he's asked, isn't it unethical to sell somebody a solution with a factor 10 of a price rather than selling him or her the cheap product. And he says, no, it's the other way around. It's selling somebody a product instead of the solution is unethical. I found that quite challenging. And funny enough, I experienced it this week. My office chair had a problem, and it was losing altitude regularly. And as I was teaching or in a training, I was sliding down and losing altitude, which was really a pain. First it was funny, but then it got a pain. So I called a friend. He's working for a large chair manufacturer. Maybe you've heard of the company called Interstuhl. So I said, Marco, I think I need a chair. So I went into their showroom in Vienna, and we looked at different chairs. And what I experienced, the longer we were talking, the more questions he asked, the more he was working his way through to what am I looking for, what is my need and my demand. And I figured out that, and I could experience exactly that case, and that's not, of course, it's not rocket science, but it's a super example of where that happens. That actually he was looking at all kind of other things. Of course, I've put some symbols in here just to show. The first one is health. I figured out how much I was actually sitting and spending my days on a chair, and that my highest priority in this case, one of my highest priorities, even more than that, the sustainability of that chair is I want my back not to be harmed by all my sitting, and also I don't want to have a neck as a camel over the years. These aspects could be health, could be anything, could be prestige or power or being unique, having freedom, not to end up in a wheelchair, and environment, name it, freedom. So stop selling a chair. I walked out of that shop. I walked in to buy a chair. I walked out with a solution, and I was open to buy a chair twice the price as before, and walked out with a satisfied grin. Now I would say that was a good sales pitch and a good example for here. Let's move on as the time is moving on. Pitch to the heart. That again overlaps with the first step of saying we can compete with other algorithms and so on if we pitch to the heart. We're humans after all. The way we are built up, and now I'm looking at a guy called Oren Klaff, who wrote a book, Pitching Anything. I don't agree with everything he puts in there, but he emphasizes that very strongly, saying pitch to the croc brain. And you can see this skull turning now. These two red dots in the middle, that is the absolute core of our brain. He calls it the croc brain. It's also called I'll tell you afterwards. It's a complicated name. Amygdala, it's called. Yeah, I'm not a medical. So what he says is this is in charge. It's a super quick scanner, a processor that takes very quick decisions on in regard to safety, anger, anxiety, and so on. Good and bad, good and evil. These are things. This processor is not able to for fuzzy logic. This is a digital mind, basically. Strange enough, even though we talk about a human. So it takes a stand, and it does not like to be taken off that. It reacts very quickly. The first check takes about 150 milliseconds. We all know that's the first impression, but the first impression is just checked whether we are friend or enemy and so on. Second check takes less than 90 seconds, and that is our crucial first impression. We want to meet the heart quite early. As mentioned earlier, this croc brain, we take decisions quickly and more intuitively. That there are studies that show that we take that our decisions have either always been only intuitively or based on intuition, or are growingly so. He calls that those hot decisions, versus cognitive decisions that are cold decisions. The croc brain, and that's important, it hates to be wrong. Once it has taken a decision, has taken a stand, it will defend it, and it will ask the big brother, the cognitive brain, to support that and to defend that with facts. That is also helpful to understand also the polarization in society that we have, why people take a stand and then they are really reluctant to move off of that. Because that brain would have to admit to itself that it didn't take a good judgment. And this part of the brain does not like the fact, like to be doubting that the decisions are not good that it takes. So it is justified after we have taken the intuitive decision. It's afterwards there's a cognitive justification constructed around it. So that's quite interesting, and that's really important. Now, if we talk to pitching to the heart and go back to the story, that's the reason why storytelling is so important, because it really goes into the heart. And just imagine my friend Marco meets another customer somebody at a bar and wants to get in a conversation, and he says, "What do you do?" And he says, "Well, I work for Interstore, and I sell sitting solutions." And he might as well take my example and say, "The other day, a business friend came and he wanted to buy a chair. How ridiculous is that?" That would be quite a nice, very provocative thing for a managing director of a chair company to find it ridiculous somebody wanted to buy a chair. But at the same time, it would be such a nice entry into a conversation to say, we sell healthy sitting rather than a chair. One company that I worked for, they said, we sell light, not lighting. In reality, they were selling light fixtures. To give you a good reminder, if we pitch to the heart, I find it very helpful. These 4 P's of human motivation, that's very helpful. It is profit, peace, pleasure, and power or prestige. They say human decisions are often, or almost always, they can be traced back to one of these 4. And I have observed that over the last years, and I confirm that even if I found a new motivation, I can actually fit it in there into some of these. Now, all of these have an upside and a downside, or two sides of the coin. And that is, people buy for profit. In order to make profit, they buy from you. And they love to make profit, but even more so, they hate to lose profit. Or people who buy from me because they want peace. For instance, I am an insurance company, and they want to buy an insurance policy from me. Then probably they buy it because they want to gain peace, but for sure they don't want to lose peace. And that's why what the pitch of an insurance guy, representative, will probably go into the sector of looking at loss of peace. Basically, he says, what if your house burns down? Yeah? And literature shows that the fear of loss is even stronger than our greed. So that is something very effective as well. And the same thing for pleasure. Some people buy because they want to gain pleasure, and a lot of people buy because they want to increase their power or their prestige. So if we feed any of those, if we want to reach the heart of them, that is something we need to address, and that is quite helpful. I was wondering, so where does health come in, or environment come in, or beliefs, faith? Some people buy something or do take decisions because of their faith. I would think, I was about to start a new category, but I think it goes into the category of peace, as that is peace of heart and conscience and things like that. I think it goes into peace. And other things such as self-worth. Some people buy things out of the desire of having self-worth or belonging. That probably might go into power and prestige. Look at your own situation and prepare and construct your pitch around one of these things that is, or variants of pitches that can answer this question if you look at some of these P's of motivation. Good. I see that time is flying, so we'll get to the last rule. Pitch for the next pitch. Some of us, especially in sales, we in the past, maybe I suppose they might still do it, and we learned to pitch to sell immediately. And I must say, there's an exception, yes, when this is true. This is for if you are a street vendor, then probably it's true that you pitch, you don't have much time, the customer buys it now, or he doesn't, or she. So this is a thing of unless you are a street vendor, and even a street vendor has probably a pickup line, which is the first icebreaker and pitch going, trying to make you a customer of his. Unless you are a street vendor and you have a complex product, the more complex your product, the more steps you have to get to the deal. So basically, pitch for more time, because you will need more time in order to work out and elucidate the solution, find out the diagnosis and the solution that you want to sell. Otherwise, you might sell a chair, but it'll have to compete with the cheapest IKEA chair. But if you get the topic of health in there, the topic of prestige and comfort and what else, and longevity, then suddenly you have a packet that has less competition. It's much more fun to sell as well. So you got the initial pitch. With that, you're trying. The goal is not to sell in that pitch. The goal is to gain enough interest to go into a telephone call, a video conference probably, or another pitch dependent. Maybe the pitch is immediately after the first one. That's nice if it can work out. But for sure, it's going to be another pitch. I'm sure Mercedes shop, they will not sell any car after the first pitch. Or somebody else might have done the pitch for them. Now, the next step might be a meeting, a personal meeting, or being introduced to relevant stakeholders in this question. And then there might be a deal. If your product is, if you're selling a train line or a cruise liner, there might be more decisions, or if it's a political thing, there might be more loops of decisions and pitches. And if you're selling something smaller, it might just be a few pitches. Good. This actually concludes the 5 rules. You might say you haven't said much about my pitch. Your pitch needs to be looked into individually from your point of view. But I am absolutely positive that if you keep those things in mind and keep iterating your pitch, that this pitch will be very crispy. Here, my last appeal to you: improve your pitch constantly, because time changes, your clients change, the markets change, your competitors change, you change, your knowledge changes, and changes, your products change. So keep iterating that, and it's fine to do so. The principles are that you qualify. The principles of your pitch itself is qualify yourself in that pitch, unless you have already done it in the conversation around it. Name the problem, name the solution, and give a call to action. It might be an invitation for the next pitch, or it might be an open question. Iterate your pitch, improve it from time to time, and rehearse it. So good. So these are the 5 rules. Qualify yourself on a human basis and qualify yourself as a competent human. No prescription without a diagnosis. Stop selling a product, sell a solution. Pitch to the heart, not to the brain. Pitch for the next pitch, and close with an open question. Maybe as an example, one of my pitches that I enjoy doing is, of course, I would establish my competence by saying, based on my 20 years of experience in international sales, I make people taller. And with that, it's a provocation, of course, and the people say, excuse me, have you said taller? Yes, I make people taller before they go into negotiations, and I give them a satisfied smile when they walk out. And maybe I will close with a question to say, when did you attend a really good negotiation training? And make sure you get back into the questioning and listening mode at the end. So with that, I have already surpassed the 30 minutes and apologize for that. If you have any more questions, here's the last slide of the contact of Stephanie. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, here's the contact details of Stephanie. Stephanie, with that, I give the word back to you. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will glad to discuss them together.
I just had a look in the chat. Besides Michael saying his farewells, there are no open questions, but I do have one for you, Martin. What if I was interested in learning more about the perfect pitch? Is there an opportunity for me?
What a spontaneous question.
I know, never thought of that before.
Very good. Of course, looking at a pitch, we have just scratched some of the theory behind it. That's basically the skeleton of what makes up a good pitch. The best thing is, the most effective thing that I have seen is to get together with other people, either in an organized training or with one or two colleagues of your team, and discuss those questions together. Build up your diagnostic questions together. Look at the potential problems that your ideal customer has, your stereotype of a customer, and work out that together. What I can also recommend is to go and do it in a workshop, like we're planning to do. Stephanie will say more about that. Meet with others, try out your pitch in a group, build it up with others in small groups, in pairs, and then iterate it within that day, and then present it and hone it again and iterate it again. If there's enough time, ideally you would look into your body language as well, and say, and your appearance, your voice, your gesture, things like that. Ideally you can work on that as well. And even work on objection management, to say, what are the typical questions that people ask, and say, why should I pay 400 euros for a chair? And then you might answer, you're not buying a chair, you're buying a straight back. Yeah. So those are things that are much better to do in a group, much more fun to do in a group, and you really do it, because at home, who's going to spend 8 hours working on his pitch? So that's something that I can recommend highly. But that's back to you, Stephanie. I think you've already set a few dates, or you're anticipating dates for trainings. Yes, like that.
We were thinking about 2 Thursdays. So you'll have the chance on Thursday, the 7th of April or the 28th of April to really hone in on your sales and pitching skills. That will be a present seminar in St. Pölten at the BQ Center. And we will give you all of the information in a separate message, meaning that everyone who has signed up will either way receive an email, or a LinkedIn direct message with the most important information. Also on our website that you can see right now. The information will be up shortly, and we'd be very happy to meet you in person.
Okay. Stephanie, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity for this exciting topic. And to all of you, don't stop iterating your pitch and keep on working on that. It's worth it. It's a lot of fun. And the more you try it out, the more you practice it, even with people in the bar where you know they won't buy a cruise liner from you. But try things out, try new questions out, try diagnostic questions. Good. And with that, I'll clear the stage.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Good afternoon to all of you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.